White Sox general manager Chris Getz was wheeling and dealing and shaking up the roster with a series of trades, but did these moves actually improve the team or just reshuffle the deck?
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Well, I'm going to get to the surprising minimal number of prospects that the organization decided to add to the 40-man roster and not expose to next month's Rule 5 draft after I talk about the practical acquisition of left-handed reliever Chris Murphy. But first, let's discuss the White Sox trading pitchers Yoendrys Gomez and Steven Wilson to the Tampa Bay Rays for outfielder Everson Pereira and a prospect, and if the White Sox are taking a risk with Pereira, or if they can develop him where two other organizations have failed. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets used across the app. Download the app today. Well, I give general manager Chris Getz credit for trading Yoendrys Gomez and Steven Wilson and getting actually something viable in the deal, and he must really love acquiring former top 100 prospects, especially from the Tampa Bay Rays organization. At last July's trade deadline, he acquired Curtis Mead in the Adrian Hauser deal, and now he's acquired Everson Pereira, a former top 100 prospect according to Baseball America when he was with the New York Yankees. But the Mead acquisition, at least the White Sox got 2 months to see if he's worth trying to see if he can reach his potential, to see if the juice is worth the squeeze. The organization is taking a risk with Pereira by hoping he has a good spring training to make the team as he's out of minor league options. And that's kind of one of the gambles here because Yoendrys Gomez, while I don't think he would have broken spring training as in the rotation, he could have been a swingman in the bullpen. And Steven Wilson, I will always give him credit because he had that horrific 2024 season after being acquired in the Dylan Cease trade. He was just terrible in the bullpen, but he bounced back quite nicely last season. Now, wasn't the greatest in high leverage, but he had an ERA in the threes. But again, it only cost you Yoendrys Gomez and Steven Wilson, so I'm fine taking the risk. I'm not sure the White Sox needed another infield prospect like Tanner Murray, but it can't hurt to have a depth option at AAA, especially if the organization wants to, have top 30 prospects, Terrell Perez, Sam Antonacci, William Bergoya, all start the year at AAA again. You got to have kind of somebody who is practically there at AAA in case there's some injuries, and he could compete for one of the utility roles in spring training. And he's got some pop in his bat too. So it was, I think, a solid deal. And it's a solid deal in adding Pereira's power potential. It's worth seeing if he can reach his potential because the guy can mash. He's got some power in that bat. And the White Sox need power in the lineup. They desperately need it. But what's holding him back? Well, he strikes out a lot. And that's going to be one of the things the White Sox are going to have to try to fix. He has 68 strikeouts and 158 big league career at-bats with the Yankees and the Rays. And struggling to make contact at the big league level has also led to a paltry 146 average and 442 OPS in those at-bats. But again, why take the chance? Well, he's going to be 25 next season, so still relatively young. Obviously, you want, your prospects more to be that are emerging in the 21 to 23 range, but 25, still relatively young. Lots of club control. He has a career 504 slugging percentage in the minors. He also posted 128 WRC plus last year at AAA, where he split time with the Yankees affiliate and then with the Rays affiliate at Durham after being traded for Jose Cabrera. And he did crush 21 home runs last year in the minors. So you can see why the White Sox are going to see, can this guy make the team? And I think he probably should. I mean, they need at least a fourth outfielder. And can he hit for power? And he did hit 2 home runs when he did get called up with the Rays. And Gomez, he was not a guarantee to make the rotation. So I'll always appreciate him eating up innings in the rotation late in the season after you had, the regression of Sean Burke and Jonathan Cannon. another injury to Martin Perez. So they needed somebody to eat innings. And I love the movement he had on his pitches. But he was probably more of a swingman. And again, it wasn't like he was getting, like, he had 6 walks in a game once. He did struggle with his command. And I think the White Sox, as I keep saying, they still have other options. And I would still prefer them to get, 2 veteran starters in the free agent market. And Wilson, he was set to earn around, I think it was $1.4 million in ARB. So I'd rather I'd rather save, even if it's $700,000, turn that salary cap space into some outfield help and use the rest of the savings to maybe help build towards a better offer for, a bargain bin starter. Even if it is $700,000, every dollar counts when you have such limited spending options. You have these self-imposed, very tight salary caps that the team, that the owner puts on the team. So I'd rather use that to maybe get a better bullpen arm in high leverage situation. Because again, I loved how Wilson bounced back, but like most of the bullpen, he had his struggles in high leverage. And if Pereira can cut down on the Ks, then maybe the White Sox have a potential long-term power hitting outfielder. It's worth taking a risk on. But I also think him and Meade are going to be litmus tests to see if hitting director Ryan Fuller and new hitting coach Derek Shomon can actually do something this organization has struggled to do a lot of. And that is salvage former highly regarded prospects. Now, the organization sort of has a win with Miguel Vargas. That late April, May bounce back, I will always give him a ton of credit for. I mean, at one point, he was looking like he was almost going to be an all-star. It looked like it was a star player, but obviously, he regressed back to the mean. And what those, what that bounce back did, what that swing adjustment did, was just get him up to be a raised floor player. And as I keep saying, the White Sox need more raised, they need just as many raised floor players as they do elite players. But you want to see this hitting coaching duo get even all 3 of these guys to reach their ceilings. And that's usually high for guys who are former top 100 prospects. So I give Chris Getz some credit for getting a former highly regarded prospect in this deal. See if he can salvage. But again, let's see if if this organization can actually finally salvage some of these guys to just actually get them to be almost star players or even 3 F4 players. But if Pereira is at least more than I've seen on social media the joke, well, it's just another Joshua Palacios. I really hope it's not another Joshua Palacios. I really hope it's actually a development win. Well, the other trade Chris Getz made was very practical as he acquired left-handed reliever Chris Murphy from Boston. And let's break down what he will bring to the bullpen after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. The NBA Cup Championship game is just under a month away, and if you think Cleveland's going to win it all, they're at plus 800 the last time I checked. So even if you put as little as $5 on that and it hits, it will pay out $40. Think Milwaukee could win the NBA Cup 2 years in a row. Well, they're at plus 1,900. So $5 on that and it happening, that can pay out $95. And if you think Luka can win the regular season MVP, and I saw him on Saturday night and he looked like he could win an MVP, well, he's at plus 500. So $10 on that. And if it does happen, that pays out $50. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, You get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify, so make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your audio-only podcast. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and OnTapSportsNet.com. Well, it wouldn't be a White Sox offseason if the organization did not make a trade with Boston. Last year, it was the Garrett Crochet blockbuster and then what I would rate as a terrible process trade of sending a young pitching prospect with upside for Cam Boozer. But this year's trade, I think, saw the White Sox use good process to acquire a reliever with Boston, and it did address a need because they acquired lefty Chris Murphy. And the bullpen's going to need another left-handed reliever after Fraser Ellard has decided to retire. That's one of the ways that the White Sox created some roster space on the 40-man that I'm going to talk about in the next segment. However, he's got to find a way to limit the walks, although it could just be he needs to shake off the rust after missing the entire 2024 season and half of 2025 after Tommy John surgery. And I will say this, he was hard to get hits off of, which is good, and he's also great at inducing ground balls. And we know that the White Sox bullpen strategy is since strikeouts are expensive, is then get weak contact or use funky deliveries to get swing and misses to kind of throw the hitters off. So he does fit into getting weak contact. However, he's going to need some good defense to back him up, as his ERA to FIP had a huge gap. And he doesn't have a ton of experience in high leverage situations. So there might be a bit of roster redundancy in that he is an ideal lefty to pitch in low leverage or medium leverage situations, probably early in the game, innings 4 through 6. But the Sox have Brandon Eisert for that role. And I've always said that I think that's his ideal role. Now, he does have minor league options, and he does throw harder than Eisert with an average of 94 miles per hour on his fastball. And there is actually the potential to possibly stretch him out to be a starter, or at least he could be a longer outing opener. He can pitch up to 3 innings. And again, he's got minor league options. So this is a very practical, good trade. And I like how James Fagan and Jim Margulis at SoxMachine.com, this is how they summarize Murphy. Murphy made 43 appearances over 2 seasons with Boston. Those seasons were in 2023 and 2025, as he lost all of 2024 to Tommy John surgery. He fared decently in 23 games after returning in June, although he experienced the typical post-surgery command issues with a spike in his MLB walk rate, 8.5% to 13%. He was able to successfully work around it and posted a Chicago-like 3.12 ERA, and given that he was tasked mostly with low leverage opportunities and had the length to pitch upwards of 3 innings, it worked well enough. As for what he throws, it's a fastball slider, or cutter to lefties, and a fastball curveball to lefties, or to righties. And he's able to keep more than half the contact on the ground, which is interesting. He also seems to be a tinkerer, so his arsenal may further evolve. And there's a really good past interview on Fangraphs. It's from 2023 where they dive into his mind. He's a very smart guy, and I think he's a very self-realized bullpen guy too. He's always thinking about, hey, how can I get guys out? What's my pitch sequence? What's the command? It doesn't have to always be about like how hard am I throwing, all that stuff. So it's good to have a smart pitcher too. And I wouldn't be too worried about the command. He did have because he had a 8.1 walk rate in 2023. So I think the increase in the walks, because he had 20 and 34 and 2/3 innings, it probably was the post-surgery rust. It's probably, you're still not able to command everything that you want to do. It's just coming off, kind of working out everything. Obviously, if he has walk issues this upcoming season, then you got to worry. But if he gets back to what he was at 2023, where he's inducing ground balls and not issuing free passes, I think it's a very good acquisition. And again, you've got to like the 54.3% ground ball percentage that he had this past season. But he had a 507 FIP. So he kind of does need the defense and some luck to help him maintain an ERA around 3. So you got to wonder, is it sustainable? That's what everybody keeps saying about Mike Vasil. Is it sustainable? But like Mike Vasil, there's still room for him to grow. I mean, Murphy is 27. And what I really like about this trade is it was good process and that the White Sox only had to give up catching prospect Ronnie Hernandez. And that is much better than what the White Sox gave up to get Cam Boozer last offseason. I mean, the White Sox gave up a very young pitching prospect, which, fine, scratch off. But he still had a lot of upside. And that's why if you're going to give up scratch off prospects, like an international free agent signing, like Ronnie Hernandez is, making it be a hitter, because hitters usually have a high bust potential than young pitchers because, again, even 18-year-old international signings, they, when it comes to a pitcher, if they've got like good velocity or if they got one, pitch that's over that 50 grade on the 80-20 scout scale, they could leverage that at someday to be at least a bullpen arm and be a big league contributor and possibly be a great big league contributor. Freddie Peralta, he was a scratch-off prospect acquired in a trade that the Brewers got. So the chances of a hitter usually becoming Fernando Tatis are much rarer than a pitcher developing into at least a solid reliever. That's more common. And that's why I was like, you gave up an 18-year-old prospect for a 32-year-old reliever who was solid in medium leverage to be a high leverage reliever where his numbers were awful. And also for a guy that was actually out of baseball for a while and had to work construction to build up his arm to even just get back into the big leagues. It was bad process. I would have been fine, at least process-wise, had the White Sox traded a Ronnie Hernandez-like guy for Cam Boozer, because we saw how inconsistent Cam Boozer was. My only thing is I do wonder, though, if the front office and manager Will Venable is going to try to use them in high leverage. And the reason why I just bring it up is on the peripherals. Now, the stuff, obviously, he only throws 94. So usually in high leverage, you do want guys that can obviously throw harder. But if you got the stuff is stuff, when it comes to getting outs. But he's hard to get hits off of. If you look at his splits last year or this past season, righties hit just 158 off of him and lefties hit 196. And the batting average that opponents had with runners in scoring position was just 156. So you got to wonder, maybe do they think he is a high leverage lefty? That's the thing. He can bring some versatility. He can bring some maybe potential, but otherwise, you got a low, medium leverage lefty. And maybe, do you want to stretch him out? Because he was once a starter in the minors. And since he can get righties out and lefties, maybe you go with him and Brandon Eiser as your low leverage or middle inning medium leverage guys. And then you go and acquire, you add as many high leverage pieces as you can. Because again, for Will Venable's bullpen strategy to work, where again, he wants to use his best arms in high leverage situations when they present himself. Because again, the biggest out may not be in the ninth inning. It may be in the sixth. So maybe you might want to deploy Grant Taylor in the sixth inning. But if it's still a close game, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, you still need a closer. That's why, again, the White Sox, I believe, for Will Venable's strategy to work, needs 6 basically closer-like arms. And then 2 long relievers, swingmen. So that's another thing. Murphy could be that swingman pitcher. Well, I did say on yesterday's show not to freak out if the White Sox didn't protect certain prospects from the Rule 5 draft. However, even I'll admit, I was a bit surprised with the decisions the front office made of who they added to the 40-man roster, and I'll discuss why after the break. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so here's what surprised me about the prospects the White Sox added to the 40-man roster to protect from next month's Rule 5 draft. It was the lack of prospects they added. The team announced that they were only added 2 prospects to the 40-man to protect from the Rule 5 draft. Top 10 prospect, pitcher Tanner McDougal, along with pitching prospect Duncan Davitt. They were the only ones added to the 40-man roster. And obviously, I was screaming to the hills that you had to add Tanner McDougal. I mean, he's your number 7 prospect, throws some tremendous heat. The stuff is really promising. He's got the chance to be a very good starting pitcher in the league someday, or at least a very good high leverage arm as his floor. Duncan Davitt, I kind of see the logic in it, in that he was acquired from the Rays last July, also in that Adrian Hauser trade. Basically a good organizational depth starter. I mean, you need those guys in case there's some injuries. I wouldn't bank on him being a good starter in the league, but if you need somebody to cover maybe a 15-day IL stint, I would think that he could come up and do that and give you a chance to win. I mean, that's what you got to hope for in terms of his potential. And again, you need depth to prevent. I mean, as we saw last year, everybody was, I remember talking, hey, we got Drew Thorpe, but we got Kai Bush, and we got Mason Adams. And man, this rotation has got so many options. And then a bunch of guys needed Tommy John surgery. So that's why. And then they signed Martin Perez, and he's very effective in April. And then he's got an elbow injury, and he misses basically almost the entire season. So you need depth starters. But the fact that they only added those 2, and especially since they had about 7 of their top 30 prospects per MLB pipeline eligible for the Rule 5, and they only decided to protect 1, that shows you what they think, though, of guys like Peyton Pallette, Mason Adams, and Tyler Schweitzer, and also productive non-top 30 prospects like Shane Murphy. I mean, they chose Duncan Davitt over Murphy, and Murphy had one of the lowest ERAs in all of baseball. And, there was this kind of thinking that Murphy, Pallette, and Adams, they were also going to get added to the 40-man. Again, they had 5 open spots coming into the 5 p.m. Central Standard Time deadline yesterday. And it turned out they got 6 when Fraser Eller decided to retire. And then even following the trades that they made, and then adding the 2 prospects, the 40-man is now currently at 37. And you can get down to 36 by non-tendering Derek Hill. And I still don't get why Ben Collins is even on the 40-man roster. So you can get down to 35. And maybe they do decide to non-tender Mike Tauchman. I think I would be going out on a stretch, though, by penciling in Everson Pereira as your opening day right fielder or left fielder. But let's say they decide to save on some costs. They want to use that $3 million again to load up and be able to go chase a starter. You can get down to 34. So they had, and again, you could get rid of Cam Boozer and Tyler Gilbert too and be okay. Gets you down to 32. They could have added some more guys. So I do think it just shows you what they think of these guys, but it also shows you that maybe they're not as worried as maybe some prospect gurus would be, because I think these are gambles we're taking, except on Pallette, because it just feels like he's going to get taken in the Rule 5 draft. He can throw 98, 99. Teams are always looking for velocity in their bullpen. But I feel like, for example, the organization is definitely not high on him as maybe I am or some other observers. But, I was a little bit surprised that Murphy wasn't added, at least too, because he had the production. He had an ERA under 2 at Double-A, and you had pitching director Brian Bannister raving about his stuff, and he's left-handed. So you do wonder, why didn't they add him to the 40-man? Now, obviously the concern is the lack of velocity, but having depth at starting pitching is something all teams are looking for. So I thought it might make sense to put him on the 40-man. Because I could see them saying, okay, I think his fastball tops out at 88, 89. So I could see, a lot of teams, thinking, okay, given the choice of whatever is out there, I'll go with somebody that can maybe throw a little bit harder. And especially since, while the stuff was very good, and I did see him pitch a few times, obviously, with my MLB.TV package, it's not like he has that elite changeup like Drew Thorpe. And even then, Drew Thorpe can get to 91 to 94. So maybe, again, they're thinking, teams are going to be looking for maybe some higher velocity. And especially if you want to stash them, in the bullpen and say long relief, again, teams are tending to look for velocity guys. Or again, guys like Chris Murphy, who can at least throw 91 to 94. Because again, if you make a mistake with your fastball, you can still sometimes not have it tattooed if it's got 92, 93, 94. But if it's got 88, it's going to get parked in the outfield bleachers. So maybe, again, teams don't want to stash him in long relief. And if a team did take him as a starter, well, it means taking a gamble on a spin guy every 5 days who's, again, stuff is intriguing, but does it have the elite pedigree like, say, Drew Thorpe? And again, I'm not trying to, crap on Shane Murphy. I really like his stuff. I'm just saying I think this is probably what they're rationalizing when they didn't put him on the 40-man. And again, I said, Paulette, it would not shock me if he gets taken in the Rule 5. One of the reasons, though, I think maybe they're not, as high on him as others is Getz. He wasn't the general manager when he was drafted in the second round. And usually the general manager is probably involved. He's definitely involved in the first round pick, even though, again, it's the amateur scouting director and Mike Shirley is still there. But he's the, or was it 2022? I think they took him. Either way, but he wasn't the GM. And the general manager, I would like to think, is hopefully involved in the second round pick, but, at least the top 100 where you got a chance to get some high upside guys. But they didn't put him on the 40-man. And they didn't call him up this past season when they really, really needed a power arm. So it seems clear they're content to possibly lose him. But I keep saying, like, again, Mason Adams. I had somebody jump in the comments, oh, this is going to be a tragedy. Again, he's coming off Tommy John surgery. I'm willing to take the gamble. And Tyler Schweitzer, they abandoned him being a starting pitcher at AAA Charlotte. He had some decent relief outings, but then he also got blown up. But again, it's a pitch, it's a hitter's park. So again, maybe they're gambling on some teams being fooled. But the organization is going to be fine, even though they're low on fireballers in the bullpen. They've got, in terms of their, pitching depth, but they still got some promising arms in the system. And leaving 3 more roster spots open shows that the front office, I would say, is intent on adding more in free agency or trades, because if they weren't, I think they likely would have rostered at least Adams and Murphy, especially Adams. You can throw him on the 60-day IL the moment spring training opens, because, again, he's not going to be ready by opening day coming off Tommy John surgery. So he probably won't be ready until maybe May or June. So you could throw him on, and then you get some roster flexibility for any of your non-roster invites potentially making the roster out of spring training. So they probably would have done that. But it seems like, again, by keeping 3 roster spots open, they've got some ideas to add more, hopefully in free agency and trades. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with a discussion on why it's going to be organizational negligence to trade Kyle Teal, and do a Throwback Thursday since I was unable to get to Way Back Wednesday today with all the roster news. I figured that's probably what you guys want to talk about instead of Edwin Encarnacion's time on the South Side, which I am going to talk about since he's on the MLB ballot. Guys who retire get put on the MLB Hall of Fame ballot. After 5 years, I wouldn't expect him to get many votes. So obviously I'm going to discuss that. Friday's show, I got Elijah Evans from Just Baseball lined up to come on the show to discuss some potential players the White Sox could pick up in the Rule 5 draft. You can leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, on X, formerly Twitter, at LockedOnSox or at Todd J. Dub. Again, subscribe to the episode page, Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe at wherever you get your audio-only podcast. Please leave a 5-star review as well on Apple or Spotify. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.